The year is 1912, and William Howard Taft is watching his chance at becoming the president for the second time slip through the cracks. But the problem was, it wasn't because the person who beat him was a better candidate. It was because it was his former friend, President Theodore Roosevelt, decided to run against him, which took away support and ultimately led to him losing. Now, I've done debate for several years, but one topic that's always fascinated me is voting. And I've studied it for this class specifically, and I've also studied it outside of this class. Now, all of us in this classroom are going to be voting one day, and we're all going to be voting in this next presidential election. So my goal is to inform you about our current voting system and some of the problems that exist with it. So let's dive in. Currently, our voting system is a flawed system. Why? Well, the first reason is because it causes polarization. And that's because you can only really have two vote. Our system is what we call a plurality system, meaning basically whoever gets the most votes wins. But there's one problem with this. It only really allows for elections with two candidates. And because there's only really two candidates that are viable, this can lead to more polarization. According to a study by Barbaro, a professor at Johannes Gutenberg University, the plurality rule, which dominates real-world elections, creates conditions that encourage polarization, a phenomenon that widely is recognized as a threat to democratic norms. Polarization is a problem for two reasons. First, as stated in the quote, it threatens democratic norms. For example, look at gerrymandering. We're seeing it a lot today, where candidates will try to make the other candidate lose, not by merit, but instead by changing boundaries to get more votes. The second big reason that polarization is dangerous is because of violence. When disagreements increase, violence also increases. An example that we saw tragically recently was Charlie Kirk. With this increase in polarization, it led to political violence, which is obviously detrimental to our society. But not only does plurality voting cause polarization, it's also unfair. There's two main problems with it. First, spoiler candidates. You may be asking yourself, what is a spoiler candidate? Take, for example, this election. There's two candidates, candidate A and candidate B. Currently, candidate B is in the lead. But what happens if we add a third candidate? As you can see, the third candidate took away some of the votes from candidate B, leading to candidate A being in the lead. The problem with this is people don't actually like candidate A better. A majority of the people prefer candidate B, but because we added a third candidate, candidate B lost. According to Hamlin from Independent Voter News, anyone awake during the 2000 U.S. presidential election is aware of the spoiler effect. In that election, we had a candidate that didn't win who divided another candidate's support. Without Nader's presence, Gore would have won. But with Nader present, Bush won. It makes no sense for a candidate to enter the race and lose, yet still change the winner. Second, there's a problem of strategic voting. You may be asking yourself, what is strategic voting? Strategic voting is when you vote for a candidate who's not your favorite candidate, but is a candidate who you think has the best chances of victory. A lot of this is to prevent the spoiler effect from happening. For example, oftentimes there's a libertarian candidate, but people won't vote for him just not because he's not their favorite, but because they want a candidate who will actually win. They don't want to waste their vote. This is what's called strategic voting. Hamlin continues that plurality voting can bully you into voting against your favorite candidate. It does this by giving you a dilemma. Either one, support the candidate you really want, but risk having another candidate you don't like, or two, make a compromise by choosing among the frontrunners, but abandon your favorite. Ultimately, it's only in plurality voting where voting for your favorite candidate will actually lose you an election. Ultimately, America is a worse republic for having this type of election. But if plurality voting isn't the solution, then what is? Ultimately, the solution is to implement ranked choice voting. What is ranked choice voting? Well, it's simple. When you're handed a ballot, you are given a list of all of the candidates. But instead of only picking your favorite one, you rank all of the candidates in order from your favorite to your least favorite. You don't have to rank all of them, but you have the ability to rank all of them from your favorite to your least favorite. Then, when the votes are counted, they see, does anybody have a majority? If there is a majority, then the election is over, and the person with the majority won. However, if there's no majority, then this is where the magic happens. The person with the least amount of first votes gets eliminated. And instead of their votes not counting at all, their second choice is counted. So then they tally it all up, and they do this again and again until they have a majority vote. And that is the candidate who wins. Ultimately, it will actually fix polarization. According to Ranked Vote Co., they say that elections in Maine and New York have already shown to be more positive and civil once they shifted to ranked choice voting. Mary Patola's winning campaign in Alaska's 2022 congressional special election focused on local issues and positivity, while opponents continued bashing her and each other. But ultimately, Mary was the one who won. Ultimately, in ranked choice voting, you win by appealing to more voters. However, in plurality voting, it's the people who bash others who actually win elections. Second, ranked choice voting is more fair. Ultimately, there is no strategic voting, and there are no spoiler candidates. Ranked choice continues that voters rank their most preferred candidates without fear of wasting their vote. If their most preferred candidate isn't viable, that candidate is eliminated, and the votes move to their second ranked choice. There's no penalty for voting for whom you believe in, even if that candidate is not most likely to win. But how would we actually implement this? Well, there's one simple way to implement this. Ultimately, it would require the Senate and the House agreeing to change the Constitution. To do this, they'd have to abolish the Electoral College and implement this ranked choice voting system that all states would have to implement. Ultimately, however, not everybody agrees with ranked choice voting, and there have been some proposed problems. One of these problems that people say could exist is that ranked choice voting is too complicated, but this simply isn't true. According to Ranked Vote, 99.8% of votes cast in Alaska's ranked choice vote system were valid, while Maine saw increases in voter turnout. So basically, more people wanted to vote, and their votes were accurate. I prepared a little pie chart to kind of demonstrate this. As you'll see in the blue, those are all the votes that were valid. And if you really have your good reading glasses on, you may be able to see a tiny pink sliver. Those were all the votes that were invalid. Clearly, it being too complicated is not a serious problem. The second argument that they have is votes may get exhausted. Basically, what it means to have a vote exhausted is when all of the candidates you ranked are eliminated, then your vote isn't counted at all. But the thing is, it's actually worse in plurality voting systems, because anyone who didn't vote for the top two candidates, votes are essentially wasted. Now that we know why ranked choice voting is the ideal method, let's look at what ranked choice voting would look like in the U.S. Ultimately, ranked choice voting would revolutionize the vote. There's a lot of advantages to it. As I repeated it again, there's no strategic vote. I've heard people been told before that they threw away their vote because they voted for somebody who wasn't going to win. But Rob Ritchie from the National Civic League says that Australia has used ranked choice voting for its national elections for more than a century, typically with an average of more than 5 candidates, and there's no talk of spoilers. 2. The results are more representative. Ritchie continues that ranked choice voting has proven to uphold majority rule, protect voter rights, and encourage candidates to engage with more voters. However, there are a few disadvantages. It is a little more complex than plurality voting, but ultimately that complexity should be embraced for a more fair election. and there could be some upfront costs in implementing the system. But ultimately, if we want to be a better republic, we should be willing to spend money on that. In summary, ranked choice voting is a viable and better alternative to plurality voting. While there may be upfront costs and more complexity, ultimately it will result in better elections. We can't change the results of the 1912 elections, but we can make future elections fair. I have to